Ever found yourself so, completely engrossed in a game you just lost all track of time? Maybe learn new skills without even feeling like you were trying, or, felt this really powerful connection to the world, the characters inside it, that unique pull. That's really what game designers are aiming for. And it holds, well, incredible potential for learning, especially for those of you maybe just diving into elementary education and you're thinking about how to bring that magic, that deep engagement right into your classroom, how to really spark learning in young minds. You're definitely in the right place. Imagine your students not just kind of passively getting information, but actively, even enthusiastically, building their own knowledge through play. It's a different world, right? So today we're taking a real deep dive into the fascinating world of game-based learning. And there are lots of established design principles out there, things studied for years. But our focus today, it's on three emerging factors. These are aspects that, well, newer research suggests are absolutely crucial for making learning games truly effective, deeply engaging, yeah, genuinely transformative, especially for younger learners.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is we'll be exploring incentive systems, identity design, and social presence. These aren't just, buzzwords floating around. They're areas where the science is still growing, still developing really rapidly. We're constantly uncovering new insights into how kids learn, how they stay motivated, and their impact on motivation, on learning, especially for elementary-age children who just thrive on engagement and connection. Well, it's already showing immense promise. So we'll unpack what each of these factors really is, why they matter so much for fostering learning, and maybe most importantly, how they might actually look and feel in an elementary classroom setting, giving you some concrete takeaways for your own teaching practice.
Okay, sounds great. And our insights today, they're drawn from a really comprehensive handbook chapter. It's titled Emerging Design Factors in Game-Based Learning: Incentives, Social Presence, and Identity Design by Frankie Tam and Shashank Power. This chapter really synthesizes some of the cutting-edge research in this field. So yeah, let's get started. Let's unpack how these elements can maybe revolutionize learning.
Okay, let's really dig into this idea of game-based learning first, because it's so much more than what a lot of people might initially picture, right? When we talk about game-based learning, it's definitely not just about slapping some points or, a leaderboard onto a regular worksheet, or turning a textbook chapter into some digital quiz with a few cartoon characters thrown in.
Yeah.
That's often just, well, gamification,
Yeah.
applying game elements to things that aren't games.
Exactly. That's a really important distinction. True game-based learning, it feels different. It's about designing experiences where the core game mechanics themselves, they inherently drive the learning. It's more of a fundamental shift in how we think about the learning process itself, moving away from just passive reception of information towards an active, often playful construction of knowledge. We're not just, digitizing the old methods. We're creating entirely new ways for cognitive development, for skill acquisition through that kind of intrinsic engagement with the game itself.
You've absolutely hit on a crucial distinction there. There's a rich, well-established model of game-based learning already. It includes foundational factors like instructional support, making sure the learning content is clear, well-structured, things like precise feedback, and adaptivity that means the game adjusts its difficulty or content based on the learner's individual needs.
Right, like personalized learning.
Exactly. And these are all incredibly important. There's a huge body of existing research supporting their effectiveness, no question.
Yeah.
But our deep dive today, it focuses on these three, let's call them emerging factors: incentive system design, identity design, and social presence. They're often less understood, maybe, but they're absolutely critical elements for creating appealing, motivating, and deeply immersive games. Their specific kind of nuanced impact within learning context specifically, that's still being thoroughly investigated. And that makes them the exciting frontier, really, of how we can make learning not just effective, but truly captivating and hopefully joyful for young learners.
So, okay, what does this really mean for you, the listener, someone who's deeply interested in teaching elementary students? When you're thinking about creating an environment that genuinely engages those young minds, how do these emerging factors play a role? It seems like it goes beyond just the curriculum content itself, like they're tapping into something much more fundamental, maybe, about human psychology.
Precisely. Yeah, it means we're looking right at the cutting edge of design, the kind of design that can truly captivate young learners, fostering a sustained engagement that, let's face it, traditional methods often struggle to achieve consistently. These factors are less about the what's of the content. So not just what math facts are we teaching today or what historical event are we covering, and much more about the how of the experience.
The how, okay.
Yeah, it's about how the game feels, how it motivates a child to keep trying even when they hit a challenge, and crucially, how it connects the learner to the material itself, to their own evolving sense of self within that learning process, and also to others within the learning community. For an elementary student where, engagement, curiosity, emotional connection, these are absolutely paramount for sustained effort, for memory retention, for genuine understanding. These how factors can be the difference. The difference between just a fleeting moment of interest and a really deep, memorable learning experience. They tap into these fundamental human drives, for mastery, for self-expression, for belonging, all seamlessly integrated within a playful context.
Right. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then. Let's start with incentive systems. Think about like your favorite game. Could be a board game, could be a video game, whatever. What makes you keep coming back to it? Maybe day after day or hour after hour. For a lot of us, it's those little rewards, right? Those incentives that just make playing enjoyable and kind of subtly guide our actions. It's that satisfying click when you clear a tough level, or the rush of seeing your score climb, or maybe the excitement of unlocking some new ability or piece of content. These aren't just like arbitrary add-ons. They feel integral to the game's magnetic pull. They're meticulously designed to shape how we play.
Yes, absolutely. And scientifically speaking, incentive systems are considered one of the crucial elements for making games appealing and motivating. Researchers like Garris, Allers, and Driscoll noted this way back in 2002, and then Wang and Sun reinforced it in 2011. They are essentially the fundamental mechanisms by which games provide rewards to guide player behavior. Think of them as the game's way of giving you that immediate engaging feedback, kind of saying, hey, good job, you're on the right track, keep going, or maybe try this next challenge. But it does it in a way that feels natural and exciting, not, like a chore. And for elementary students who are often highly responsive to immediate feedback and seeing tangible progress, these systems are incredibly powerful tools.
Okay, so within these systems, we often hear this distinction, intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards. In a traditional classroom, maybe we give out stickers or praise for good behavior. That sounds pretty extrinsic to me. Is one type of reward inherently better for learning, or maybe better for sparking that deep, lasting engagement we really want to see in young learners?
That's an excellent question. And it's where the nuances really start to matter. Let's define them first, maybe. So, intrinsic rewards. These are directly related to the game mechanics and the objectives themselves. They give players things like special abilities, power-ups, maybe unlocked content, new tools, or hints that are integrated into and actually enhance the gameplay itself. For example, imagine a math learning game. If a child accurately solves a series of really complex multiplication problems, maybe they earn a math wizard staff that lets their avatar instantly solve one problem per level.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Or maybe it unlocks a new, more challenging area of the game. See how this reward directly enhances their capability within the game.
Right, helps them play better.
Exactly. Now, extrinsic rewards, on the other hand, they're not directly related to or integrated into that immediate gameplay loop. They're usually given as things like points, scores, stars, maybe virtual coins, or other tangible representations of achievement. But these don't change the immediate gameplay experience. They might contribute to a total score, or a leaderboard ranking, or maybe a collection you're building. Think of earning gold coins for correct answers in, say, a history quiz game. These coins might accumulate towards a total score, but they don't change how you answer the next question or the functionality of the game right then and there.
Okay, I see the difference.
And then some rewards, like badges or trophies, they can actually be a bit of a hybrid. They can carry elements of both, as researchers like Plass and colleagues pointed out back in 2015. They might signify an achievement outside the direct gameplay, like you mastered fractions. But they might also unlock something cosmetic within the game, like a special profile icon or a new outfit for your avatar. Now, to your question about which is better, the source material suggests that reward mechanisms providing a fun and intrinsically rewarding experience might be more useful than purely extrinsic ones. Wang and Sun made this point in 2011, and this links directly to a really important theory, self-determination theory, or SDT, put forth by Ryan and Deci back in 2000. It's really foundational in human motivation research. SDT posits that the satisfaction of three basic psychological needs leads to deeply motivated behaviors and ultimately well-being. These needs are, first, autonomy, which is that sense of volition, choice, and feeling in control of one's own actions. Second, competence, which is a sense of efficacy, feeling capable and effective in your environment. And third, relatedness, that sense of connection, belonging, and feeling secure in your relationships with others.
Okay, autonomy, competence, relatedness. Got it. But how does a simple star or a badge or even just unlocking a new level in a game, How does that satisfy these really deep psychological needs? Especially for like a second grader who might just be genuinely excited about getting a shiny sticker. How does that translate into something truly meaningful and motivating for them beyond just that surface level excitement?
That's a fantastic question, and it's really where the brilliance of good game design comes in. Performance feedback and rewards for achievement in games have this profound potential to satisfy these basic psychological needs. Przylski, Rigby, and Ryan talked about this in 2010. Let's imagine an elementary science game where a child is exploring different ecosystems. For autonomy, maybe instead of just being told, complete this specific task, the game offers multiple paths to earn a reward. It might say, you can either complete 3 plant identification quests, or you could design your own mini ecosystem, or maybe interview 3 virtual scientists.
Ah, giving them choice.
Exactly. Giving that child a choice in how they earn a reward, even if the end reward is the same, deeply satisfies their need for autonomy. They feel like they're driving their own learning journey. Then for competence, when a child successfully completes a challenging puzzle or masters a new concept in the game, and then immediately receives a clear visual reward, maybe it's a Master Explorer badge that pops up, or a cool animation celebrating their achievement that clearly communicates, you did it, you are capable. This isn't just some random star, it's tangible evidence of their growing skill and understanding. The reward becomes an informational signal, confirming their increasing competence.
Okay, that makes sense. It's feedback.
It's very effective feedback. And finally, for relatedness, if the game allows for collaborative achievements, maybe there's a classroom eco-team badge earned when the whole class collectively identifies 100 different species.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Or if the game maybe highlights the progress of a friendly virtual mentor character that the child feels connected to, it fosters that sense of a shared journey, of belonging. Even just seeing other players' progress on a non-competitive, maybe encouraging display can create a sense of shared community. It's not just about the reward itself, you see, it's the feeling and the context around earning it that truly matters for satisfying these fundamental needs.
Wait a minute. So you're saying giving rewards could actually be bad, or at least counterproductive sometimes. That feels incredibly counterintuitive, especially for a teacher trying to motivate students. I mean, my whole career, I feel like I've been told, praise good work, reward effort, use positive reinforcement. This sounds like it could be a potential minefield.
Well, it's all about perception. And this is where another key part of self-determination theory, specifically cognitive evaluation theory, also by Ryan and Deci, becomes incredibly important. This theory basically states that the effects of extrinsic motivation on your intrinsic motivation are profoundly influenced by how the player perceives those rewards. So if a reward is perceived as controlling, meaning it feels like a bribe, or just a way to manipulate your behavior or something you have to do just to get something else, it can actually diminish that feeling of autonomy. And consequently, it can decrease your intrinsic motivation. Imagine a child feeling forced to read just for the sticker, rather than finding joy in the story itself. That internal desire to learn can actually be undermined.
Okay, so the why matters.
The why matters hugely. But, and this is the critical distinction, if a reward is perceived as informational, meaning it provides clear, positive feedback about your progress and competence, like, wow, you mastered this math fact, and this badge shows your amazing skill, or you successfully solved this complex problem, and here's a power-up that will help you tackle even bigger challenges. Then it supports that need for competence and can actually boost intrinsic motivation. The good news here is that research by Sarasoli, Nicklin, and Ford in 2014 suggests both intrinsic and extrinsic motivations are important for promoting learning performance. It's really about finding that delicate balance and ensuring the rewards are perceived primarily as valuable feedback and recognition of genuine achievement rather than pure control or just a means to an end. It's the subtle difference between framing it as do this for the reward versus do this, and this reward shows your amazing progress.
That framing makes a huge difference.
It really does. And extending this idea further, we could look at achievement goal theory, which Elliott articulated back in 2005. This theory identifies 2 major types of motivational goals that students tend to adopt when learning. First, performance goals. These reflect a desire to perform well and demonstrate ability, often in comparison to others. It can be driven by wanting to look good or maybe avoid looking bad. And second, mastery goals. These reflect a desire to develop competence, to understand something thoroughly, and achieve mastery for oneself. This is driven more by a focus on self-improvement and learning for its own sake. Learners typically lean towards one or the other, or a mix, and this influences their behaviors, their thoughts, and their emotional responses to learning tasks.
Right, you see that in the classroom all the time. Some kids want the top score, others just want to figure it out.
Exactly. And this is incredibly relevant for an elementary classroom, where you absolutely have students with different inherent motivations and learning styles. The type of incentive system you implement in a game, or even in your classroom activities, can either foster mastery goals or performance goals. For instance, a child who's really driven by mastery might thrive on getting a badge that shows their personal progress through a sequence of phonics skills. It celebrates their own growth, regardless of what others are doing. Another child, maybe more performance-oriented, might be more spurred on by seeing their name climb a leaderboard for completing the most math problems, pushing them to compete.
So you need to cater to both, or push towards mastery.
Well, ideally, effective game design and effective teaching can cater to both, but perhaps lean towards prioritizing the fostering of mastery goals, as they tend to lead to deeper, more sustained learning. This might involve giving students options for how they receive feedback or recognition, maybe allowing them to choose whether they want to track their progress against a personal best or against a class average, for example. Flexibility is key.
Okay, so it sounds like if a game's incentive system is designed really thoughtfully, and maybe if the teacher frames it correctly in the classroom, it can genuinely make a child feel like they can succeed, like they have the ability to master something, and maybe also that the task itself is inherently worth doing. It's not just about getting to the next level, but feeling capable, feeling valued, and feeling genuinely engaged in that learning journey itself.
Exactly. That connects beautifully to another important framework, expectancy value theory, put forth by Wigfield and Eccles around 2000. This theory posits that learners' beliefs about their own ability, their perceptions of their competence in a specific task, along with their expectancies for success on that task, and the subjective values they place on that task. These are crucial factors. They determine performance, effort, persistence. And incentive systems, when they're well designed, have the potential to directly influence these subjective values and expectancies for success. Abramovich, Shun, and Higashi argued this point in 2013. Well, think about an elementary student. If a game's incentive system is clear, if it feels achievable, and if it provides that immediate positive feedback we talked about, it can rapidly build a child's belief that, hey, I can do this. That increases their expectancy for success. And it can also communicate, this is important, and maybe even fun, which increases its subjective value. For example, a learning game where a child consistently earns small, achievable rewards for getting spelling words right might build their confidence in their spelling ability over time. This positive feedback cycle means that by making a game feel achievable and by clearly demonstrating the value and maybe the enjoyment of the learning task, the incentive system taps into and builds upon these core motivational levers. It makes the child more likely to put in effort, to persist through challenges. It can transform a potentially abstract or difficult concept into something tangible, achievable, and personally meaningful.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Can we talk about some specific examples? Like, how do these systems actually look in games, and how might a teacher think about them for their elementary classroom?
Absolutely. Let's delve into some specific incentive systems. Badges are a really popular one right now. According to Gibson and colleagues in 2015, a digital badge is essentially a visual, often online, representation of an accomplishment, an interest, or maybe an affiliation. They often have embedded metadata explaining the context, who awarded it, what criteria were met, etc. Their primary function, as identified by Wang and Sun back in 2011, is to provide that concrete sense of achievement and recognition.
Like a digital scout badge.
Kind of, yeah. Consider this example for, say, an elementary reading comprehension game. Imagine a story weaver badge. It's awarded when a student consistently identifies the main idea, the supporting details, and maybe the emotional arcs in 5 different stories. This would be a mastery badge, as described by Biles and Plass in their 2016 research, because it focuses squarely on personal skill development and demonstrating a deep understanding of a complex concept. It celebrates their growth. In contrast, maybe there's a classroom reading champion badge, awarded to the student who reads the most books in a month. That would be a performance badge, because it emphasizes comparison to other learners and achieving a top rank.
Okay, mastery versus performance. Is one better?
Well, Biles and Plass, in their study with middle school students, found something interesting. Performance achievement badges actually led to better learning outcomes overall in their specific study. However, students who already had greater situational interest, meaning they were already interested in the topic, showed better outcomes with the mastery badges. So this suggests that for students who are already intrinsically motivated or interested, emphasizing personal mastery might be more effective.
Nuanced.
Very. And another powerful finding comes from Phil Secker and Hickey in 2014. They did a study with middle school students using a complex social inquiry game. They found that incorporating badges as external rewards led to a deeper understanding of scientific inquiry compared to a control group that received no rewards at all. This really underscores the potential of badges, when designed thoughtfully, to reinforce not just surface-level engagement, but actual learning processes and outcomes. So for a teacher, choosing how to award a badge, is it for effort, for mastery, for competition? That's a key design decision.
Okay, badges make sense. What about the classics? Points, levels, leaderboards. They're everywhere. Points and levels feel pretty standard. But leaderboards, they always feel like a bit of a double-edged sword, don't they? Can they actually be good for learning? Or do they just cause stress and anxiety in a classroom, especially for young kids who might already feel competitive pressure or maybe fear failure?
That's a really important question and one many educators grapple with. And yes, the research has indeed yielded mixed findings on leaderboards. Points and levels are pretty fundamental, as you said. They serve to provide that immediate performance feedback and a sense of accomplishment, as noted by Przybilski and others in 2010. Points often help with self-assessment. Okay, I got X points, so I know I'm doing reasonably well. While levels and, yes, leaderboards can show progress towards both short-term goals like leveling up and maybe longer-term learning objective.
But the competition aspect.
Right. Leaderboards specifically are visual displays of player rankings, and they're often designed explicitly to induce competition, as Christian Fox pointed out in 2014. Now, on the positive side, Landers and Landers found in 2014 that leaderboards can increase motivation to retry a game and also increase time on task. Interestingly, they found this was particularly true if the leaderboard information was displayed at the end of the game or activity, rather than being constantly visible during play.
So less pressure in the moment.
Potentially, yes, reducing that real-time comparison pressure. And Nobel and colleagues in 2016 observed an improvement in learning outcomes and competitive effort when leaderboards were integrated into a game for college students learning about allegorical paintings. They concluded they can enhance focus and knowledge retention. However, there's a caveat. Willems and colleagues in 2014 suggested that leaderboards should really only be used when there are enough players for fair and comparable competition. If you only have a few students and maybe one or two consistently dominate, it can be incredibly discouraging for everyone else.
Yeah, I can see that happening easily.
Definitely. And the downsides are also crucial to consider, especially for elementary students. McKernan and colleagues in 2015, for instance, found no significant effect of reward elements, including points and feedback, on learning for college-level decision-making in their particular study. And even more nuanced, DeLue and Mayer back in 2011 found a positive effect of points for women, but actually a negative effect for men in an electrical circuit game. This suggests potential gender differences in how these systems are perceived and how they motivate, which adds another layer of complexity. It highlights that what works for one group might not work for another, or might even be detrimental.
Wow, okay. So for elementary kids.
For younger learners, who are still developing their self-esteem, their social comparison skills, a public individual leaderboard can absolutely be a source of significant anxiety and demotivation for many. So instead, educators might consider alternatives, maybe a class point total for collaborative tasks, where the whole class earns points together towards a group reward, like unlocking a new virtual field trip in a game or earning extra free choice time. That could be far more effective and definitely less anxiety-inducing.
Teamwork, not just individual ranking.
Exactly. Or if you are using a leaderboard, perhaps frame it differently. Maybe it's less about who's first and more about how much progress did everyone make collectively on this learning journey. Could display progress charts showing individual growth over time, maybe. Or celebrate students reaching personal milestones rather than constantly highlighting their rank compared to others. It's about subtly shifting the focus from that external individual competition towards collective achievement or personal growth and mastery.
That feels much more appropriate for younger kids.
I think so. And a crucial takeaway for our listener from all this discussion on incentives is that despite their widespread use in games, there's actually a real scarcity of studies focusing specifically on their nuanced effects in games designed for learning, particularly on their impacts on motivation and learning outcomes. We really need a much better understanding of the complex relationship between different game genres, the specific types of rewards being offered, and their precise impacts on both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and ultimately on learning transfer and long-term retention. More evidence is definitely needed to understand how different reward types impact learning under various learning goals like mastery versus performance and different levels of initial interest. And crucially, much of the foundational research on these systems, as we've seen, has been conducted with university students who are adults. We desperately need more studies with a diverse population, especially focusing on what truly works effectively and ethically for elementary-age children across various socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds. That's essential to really solidify effective design principles for our youngest learners. It's really an exciting and open area for future research and innovation.
Okay, that's a great overview of incentives. Let's turn our attention now to the next fascinating and maybe deeply personal area. Identity design. Have you ever picked an avatar in a game, maybe spent ages customizing it and felt like it was truly you? Or perhaps, the you aspire to be. It often feels like more than just a superficial choice of appearance. There can be this profound connection. That's what identity design taps into, right? That psychological connection between a player and their virtual representation. It's not just a character on a screen. It can feel like an extension of themselves, a vehicle for exploration, or even, like you said, a desired self.
That's exactly right. Identity design is essentially a practice that helps enhance this deep psychological connection between a player and their avatar. Turkey and Kinzer highlighted this point in 2014, and this connection is incredibly powerful. Studies by researchers like Ganesh et al., Jeannie Levin, and Hefner et al. Offada back in 2007 have shown pretty convincingly that it significantly increases gaming motivation, overall game enjoyment, and it can even evoke strong positive emotions. It's really about creating a virtual persona that resonates deeply with the player, making the entire experience feel far more personal, more immersive, and ultimately more engaging. And for a young learner, this can potentially transform what might feel like a simple learning task into something that feels more like an epic personal quest.
A personal quest. I like that framing.
Yeah. And it raises an important question. How does this virtual me actually work? How does this connection form? James Gee, who's a really prominent scholar in the field of games and learning, in his seminal 2007 book, What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy, he breaks down this concept of identity in games into 3 distinct types. And this framework really helps us understand the different layers of connection that players can form.
Okay, 3 types. What are they?
So first, Gee says there's your real identity. This comes directly from you, the player. It's shaped by your real-world values, your personal experiences, your everyday self. This is the foundation you bring to the game. Second, there's the virtual identity. Now, this is the identity that's ascribed by the game designers to the character within the game's narrative. It includes things like the character's backstory, their predefined personality traits, their inherent abilities within the game world. This is the character as the game sort of intends them to be. And finally, perhaps the most interesting one is the projected identity. This is the dynamic interface, the bridge between your real and virtual identities. It's how you, as a player, actively craft and evolve your avatar's narrative by projecting your real-world values, your desires, maybe your ideal self, even your aspirations, onto your virtual representation. It's that unique fusion that makes the avatar feel like your avatar, not just any character.
Wow. Okay, projected identity. So it's like a mix of me and the game character.
In a way, yes. And there's compelling empirical support for this concept. Bissiere and colleagues did a fascinating study back in 2007. They had players complete personality surveys from 3 different perspectives: their ideal selves, their real selves, and their virtual selves, their main game character. The results were quite telling. Players consistently rated their virtual identity as significantly closer to their ideal self than to their real self.
Really? Closer to their ideal self?
Yes. This suggests that games provide this unique and perhaps safe space for identity exploration and expression. It allows individuals to embody aspirational traits or explore different facets of their personality in a relatively low-stakes environment. So for an elementary student, this might mean embodying a brave explorer avatar who isn't afraid of complex math problems, even if in real life they might feel a bit shy or uncertain about math. The avatar lets them try on that confidence.
Okay, wow. So this really isn't just about picking a cool skin or a cute character because it looks nice. There's potentially a deep, maybe even subconscious connection happening here, where players are actively shaping who they are or maybe who they want to be through their avatar. That feels, a lot more profound than I initially imagined. Almost like a form of playful self-discovery, which makes perfect sense for young learners, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It taps right into that developmental stage. And it's not just psychological. The profoundness of this connection is also backed by some really interesting neuroscientific evidence. Ganesh and colleagues in that 2011 study I mentioned did a truly fascinating experiment using fMRI, which measures brain activity. They compared the neural activity of long-term World of Warcraft players to a control group of non-gamers. They showed the gamers pictures of their own avatars alongside images of human faces and some neutral stimuli. The control group, meanwhile, saw pictures of their favorite cartoon characters instead of avatars.
Okay, so what did they find?
The results were quite remarkable. The gamers had a significantly stronger emotional response, neurally speaking, to seeing their own avatar than they did to seeing their favorite cartoon character. But even more remarkably, their neurological response to their avatars was actually similar to their response when viewing images of other human beings. This pattern was not seen for the non-gamers reacting to cartoon characters.
Whoa, so the brain sees the avatar almost like another person.
It suggests something along those lines, yes. These findings strongly suggest the existence of a deep, almost visceral emotional association between long-term gamers and their gaming identity. It shows this connection isn't just some fleeting preference, but something that taps into fundamental neural pathways related to social cognition, indicating perhaps a form of extended self.
That's incredible. So how does this powerful connection, this identification, link back to learning?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture for education, this phenomenon of identification affects both in-game experiences and potentially out-of-game outcomes, too. Studies have clearly shown, as we mentioned, that strong identification influences game enjoyment and motivation. Hefner et al., in 2007, for example, found that players' identification scores were strongly correlated with how much they reported enjoying the game. And importantly, this increased motivation and enjoyment can, in turn, create a more fertile ground for learning. It can potentially directly improve learning outcomes. Now, while the empirical evidence directly linking identity design specifically to learning outcomes is still considered somewhat scarce compared to, say, research on feedback, the preliminary findings that do exist are remarkably supportive and very promising, especially when thinking about elementary students.
Okay, like what kind of findings?
Well, consider this powerful elementary example from a study by Cordova and Lepper way back in 1996. It's really one of the foundational studies in this specific area. They use a math learning game. They had different groups of students. One group was allowed to make personal choices about their learning experience within the game. They got to choose their character's visual appearance using game icons. They got to name their character, and they even got to pick where they started on the game board. Another control group had all these choices made randomly for them by the computer.
And the results?
The results were significant. The students who were given these simple choices, just personalizing their virtual self in these basic ways, had significantly better learning outcomes on the math concepts than the control group. This demonstrates that even that seemingly small act of personalizing their identity had a direct, measurable impact on their actual learning.
Wow, just from choosing an icon and a name.
It suggests so, yes. The personal investment seems to matter. Similarly, Eng and Lindgren in 2013 conducted a study using the popular game Spore, the one about organism evolution. Participants who were given the opportunity to customize their creatures, their characters, had marginally higher gameplay-related learning scores compared to those who couldn't customize. Again, maybe a subtle effect, but still a measurable link between identity design and learning. It suggests that the deeper that personal connection to the avatar, the more invested the learner becomes in the game's success, and by extension, the learning content success.
Okay, so how could a teacher apply this? Give us a practical classroom example.
Right, think about how you might bring this into, say, an elementary science class. Imagine using a game where students get to design their own eco-hero avatar. This hero's mission is to tackle environmental challenges, maybe cleaning up a virtual forest, designing sustainable energy solutions for a virtual town, or restoring a polluted ocean area within the game. Now, giving those students choices about their hero's appearance, their hair color, their outfit, maybe special eco-gadgets they carry, giving them agency over their hero's name, and perhaps even letting them choose special powers related to environmental protection. Maybe their hero can grow plants instantly or purify polluted water with a special tool.
That sounds fun.
Exactly. That could dramatically deepen their engagement. And consequently, they're learning about the actual science topic. It makes the learning incredibly personal. They're not just passively learning about environmental science. They are actively being an environmental solution through their personalized avatar.
Yeah.
It shifts that internal narrative from I'm just doing a science assignment to something more like I'm being a hero who is saving the planet using science.
Oh,
A powerful shift.
definitely. So what specific game elements really contribute to building this strong sense of identity then?
Well, avatar customization is clearly a primary one. Allowing players to extensively customize those visual traits we mentioned
gender, skin color, hairstyle, facial structure, body type that profoundly affects their emotional arousal during play, as Lim and Rees found in 2009. And crucially, it deepens their sense of identity, according to Turkey and Kinzer in 2014. These aren't just trivial aesthetic choices, they're choices that build personal investment and connection. And interestingly, longitudinal studies like one by Turkey and Kinzer in 2014, where they followed players of Lord of the Rings Online over 2 weeks, showed that the bond, the identification between players and their avatars, actually grows stronger with the time spent playing. This indicates that identification isn't just some initial spark when you create the character, it deepens through sustained interaction and ongoing personalization. This makes longer-term learning games potentially even more powerful for identity development.
That's a great point. So it's not just about what the game gives you, like a pre-built character, but maybe more about what you allow students to create and how they interact with that creation over time. It sounds like it's really about giving them agency and building their own story within that learning context.
Exactly. You've hit on the next crucial feature, the game narrative. This also profoundly promotes identification. In games where players embody a pre-designed protagonist, the character's established behavior, their personality, their backstory, all of that can significantly moderate how much a player identifies with them, as noted by Cohen back in 2001. A compelling background narrative provided for a character can significantly enhance identification. For instance, Brooks in 2010 compared two groups playing the same game. One group received a detailed, relatable background narrative for their character, while the other group didn't. The high narrative group identified much more strongly with the character, even if their actual choices within the game were somewhat limited. The story mattered.
So the backstory helps you connect.
It can, yes. But beyond these pre-designed narratives, there's also the incredibly powerful concept of emergent narrative. As players spend more time in virtual worlds, they literally start writing their own stories through their gameplay, their actions, their choices, their progress, even their failures. They all build up a unique personal narrative that defines their specific game character. Now, while this specific phenomenon hasn't been studied directly in terms of its impact on learning outcomes via identity, it's strongly supported by that evidence showing player identification grows with time spent playing. It makes intuitive sense. For an elementary game, this could mean something like a history exploration game. Maybe students' choices of which historical figures to interact with, which quests to pursue, which problems to solve. All these choices collectively build a unique history journey for their specific avatar. The narrative you build through your actions makes the experience uniquely yours. And that deeper engagement, that sense of authorship, then profoundly strengthens the psychological connection to your avatar and, by extension, to the learning content embedded within that narrative. It's about self-authorship within the game world, which is incredibly empowering, especially for young learners.
Self-authorship, I like that. So where does the research need to go next with identity design?
Well, looking ahead, despite the clear importance of identity in video games generally, researchers like Turkey and Kinzer back in 2014 have consistently raised concerns about the significant lack of experimental studies, focusing specifically on the effects of identity design on learning outcomes. We need more direct evidence there. Much of the existing research is focused primarily on, well, visual customization of avatars and maybe the impact of pre-written game narratives. But there are so many other design features that could potentially promote identity that haven't been thoroughly explored yet. Things like the impact of emergent narrative on learning, as we just discussed, or the role of social interactions within the game in shaping identity. Maybe skill customization for avatars, or even personalized movement customization, how your avatar walks or gestures. Exploring these features might reveal additional, more nuanced ways of strengthening that sense of identity in players.
And technology must be changing things, too.
Oh, absolutely. The increasing popularity and sophistication of new hardware, especially virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR devices, offers incredibly exciting new avenues to increase identification. They could potentially create even more immersive and personal learning experiences where the child truly feels like they are the character in that environment. Along with this design innovation, there's also a pressing need for new research designs. Factorial designs, like the one Cordova and Lepper used so effectively back in '96, can be really useful. They help uncover the effect of individual design factors, but also how different factors might interact to jointly influence identity and learning. Researchers also need to conduct more long-term studies in authentic gaming environments, given that we know the bond of identification seems to grow stronger with gameplay duration. We can't just look at one-off short-term effects. And finally, the effect of identity on learning needs to be studied across different types of learning outcomes, not just knowledge acquisition, but maybe problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, and also across different game genres and learning subjects. This emerging field really holds immense potential for making learning games even more powerful by truly leveraging that profound connection players can form with their virtual selves, essentially transforming learning into a deeply personal adventure.
That's absolutely fascinating how identity can become this bridge to deeper learning. Okay, so that brings us to our third and final emerging factor. Social presence. What does this actually mean? When we talk about social presence, it sounds like it's not just about other players being in the game or maybe even a computer character just being on the screen alongside you. It's more about the feeling that they are truly with you, right? Engaging with you on a social, maybe even emotional level, even if they're miles away physically or even if they're just an artificial intelligence. It's that sort of palpable sense of shared space, shared experience, genuine connection.
You've highlighted a critical distinction there, and it often gets confused with another term. So it's really important to clarify two concepts that are often used interchangeably: immersion and presence. Immersion, as defined by Slater back in 2003, is generally considered more objective. It relates more to what the technology itself can recreate in relation to the real world. Think about, high-definition graphics, 3D surround sound, maybe haptic feedback from controllers that lets you feel vibrations, or a really wide field of view in a VR headset. It's about the technical capabilities that physically envelop you, that surround your senses. Presence, on the other hand, is entirely subjective. It's the human perception or the psychological experience of being there within that immersive environment. Lombard and Ditton famously defined it back in 1997 as the perceptual illusion of non-mediation.
The perceptual illusion of non-mediation.
Okay.
Break that down.
It basically means that profound feeling where you respond to and interact with the medium, the game, the virtual world, as if the medium itself doesn't exist, as if it's not mediating your experience. It makes the experience feel utterly real and immediate, even though you rationally know it's not. And social presence, specifically, is a vital subtype of presence. It's the feeling of being with another or being together with another, as described by Bayoka and colleagues in 2003. And importantly, this another can be another human being represented by an avatar, or it could be a sophisticated computer-controlled character, a robot in some contexts, or even an advanced artificial intelligence. Social presence exists along a continuum. You can feel varying degrees of it, from just a subtle awareness that someone else exists in the space to a really deep sense of intimacy and mutual understanding. And this feeling of connection, this social presence, can significantly impact engagement and learning outcomes, especially for young children who absolutely thrive on social interaction and connection.
Okay, so what creates that feeling? What influences the level of social presence someone experiences?
Well, two key concepts are thought to profoundly influence the level of social presence: intimacy and immediacy. Intimacy, as explored way back by Argyle and Dean in 1965, refers to that sense of connectedness you feel in a relationship. This is influenced by factors like perceived physical distance between interactants, even virtual distance, the amount of eye contact, again, even virtual, the topics covered during communication, are they personal or impersonal, and the level of personal disclosure involved. Think about how a close, personal conversation feels different from a distant, formal one. Game design elements can subtly adjust these factors to increase or decrease that feeling of intimacy. Immediacy, which was identified by Wiener and Morabian in 1968, is more a measure of the perceived psychological distance during an interaction. This can manifest as nonverbal immediacy, things like the facial expressions of an avatar, their body orientation, are they facing you, their gestures, or even how closely they approach your avatar in the virtual space. It also includes verbal immediacy, which comes through speech patterns, tone of voice, if there's audio, and the style of written communication. Does it feel direct, personal, informal, or distant and formal? Both of these, intimacy and immediacy cues, contribute significantly to how present others feel to you in a virtual environment, and how genuinely you perceive them to be interacting with you, whether they are human or AI.
That makes sense. Has this been studied much in regular online learning, not just games?
Oh yes, absolutely. Traditionally, a lot of compelling research on social presence has focused on broader online learning environments like discussion forums or virtual classrooms. And the findings there are very robust and consistent. Social presence has been consistently associated with promoting different aspects of learning, including overall learning outcomes and, very importantly, learner satisfaction in online contexts. Studies by Kim et al. In 2011 and Liu et al. In 2009 really demonstrate this. For instance, Picciano, back in 2002,
found that students in online courses that were specifically designed to foster a high sense of social presence actually scored higher on their written assignments, indicating potentially deeper engagement with the material. And Swan and colleagues in 2012 did a fascinating study where they redesigned an online course using the Community of Inquiry, or COI, framework. This framework intentionally integrates social presence, teaching presence, and cognitive presence. They found that the revised course design led to significantly improved learning outcomes for the students compared to the original design.
Okay, so it clearly matters in online courses. How does that translate to an elementary teacher, maybe even one teaching face-to-face?
Well, it's highly relevant even beyond just online settings because it relates directly to teacher immediacy. Think about it. Research consistently shows that a teacher's nonverbal immediacy, things like maintaining eye contact with students, using vocal variety and an enthusiastic tone, employing open body language, gesturing naturally, maybe physically moving closer to students in a real classroom, or even just appearing closer and more engaged on screen, is absolutely critical. It strongly influences student effective learning outcomes, how they feel about the learning, their motivation, and their overall engagement. Kearney and colleagues reported this back in 1985 for college classes, and Christoffel in 1990 found similar results, showing that teacher immediacy improves student motivation and increases learning at the college level. The principles hold.
So even little things like smiling at the camera in a video lesson matter.
They can matter a lot. These principles extend beautifully to digital learning for younger students. Imagine a teacher creating video materials for a hybrid or maybe a remote elementary class. Homer, Plass, and Blake found in 2008 that media designed to specifically enhance social presence lead to increased learner engagement and better retention of the material. So yes, a teacher who looks directly into the camera, uses a warm conversational tone, smiles frequently, maybe asks questions as is speaking directly to the child watching, that will foster far more social presence than a dry, monotone presentation just reading off slides. It makes the child feel like the teacher is truly with them, personally guiding them, not just talking at them from a distance. That connection is key.
Right. So how does this play out specifically in games? What are the dimensions there?
Good question. When we specifically look at social presence in games, Bialka and colleagues, in that 2003 paper, identified 3 key dimensions that help us understand how this feeling of being with another manifests in these virtual environments. The first dimension is co-presence. This basically refers to the sensory awareness of the other person or entity, and a mutual awareness of existence within that shared virtual space. This can be achieved in most games pretty simply through non-playable characters, NPCs, just sharing the game world. Think of a virtual shopkeeper, or a character who gives you a quest. But more directly relevant for social presence, it comes through seeing other players' avatars being visible and active in the same virtual space. For an elementary example, in that science game about animal habitats we mentioned earlier, if the virtual animals actually react when the student's avatar gets nearby, maybe they move away, or they chirp, or maybe a friendly one offers a greeting that immediately builds a sense of co-presence with the virtual world itself.
Like the world is alive.
Exactly. And even more so, if other student avatars are visible exploring the same habitat, maybe collaborating on a task like collecting samples, or even just existing alongside them as they explore, that builds a really strong sense of sharing that space with others. The second dimension is psychological involvement. This is a deeper sense of connection. It involves perceiving intelligence in the other entity, feeling the salience of the interpersonal relationship, maybe a feeling of intimacy or mutual understanding. This could be achieved through really intelligent AI in NTCs, making them create sophisticated cues for interaction, so they feel less like simple programs and more like genuine companions or guides. For example, if that virtual guide character in an elementary history game doesn't just recite historical facts, but maybe ask questions like, what do you think happened next? Or how would you have felt in that situation? And then provides personalized, seemingly thoughtful responses that make the child feel truly seen and understood, that boosts psychological involvement significantly. It doesn't feel like just a programmed response. It feels more like genuine interaction, which makes the learning journey feel much more personal and engaging.
Okay, co-presence, psychological involvement. What's the third?
The third dimension is behavioral engagement. This refers to direct behavioral interaction within the game. This includes opportunities for talking, voice chat, text chatting, or maybe identifying and responding to nonverbal cues from other players or even AI agents. Think about multiplayer educational games designed specifically for elementary students. If they allow kids to safely text chat about how to solve a puzzle together, or if their avatars can perform simple expressive gestures like giving a high five for teamwork after completing a challenge, These are direct examples of behavioral engagement fostering social presence. It creates that palpable sense of collaborative effort and shared experience.
So interaction is key.
Interaction is absolutely key. And research confirms this. Playing against human-controlled opponents consistently leads to higher reported social presence, as Heater found way back in 1992. Furthermore, networked interactivity features like chat or shared tools and educational quiz games have shown positive effects not only on social presence, but even on actual test performance, as Lee and colleagues found in 2011. Narrative and the player's sense of role engagement within the game are also crucial factors that enhance social presence, as documented by Takatalo et al. In 2010. Feeling part of a story with others matters.
Any other interesting factors?
Well, interestingly, Nowak and Bioka in 2003 even suggested that sometimes using less anthropomorphic, less perfectly human-like images in virtual human representation can actually increase perceived social presence compared to highly realistic ones.
Willie, less realistic is better.
It might seem counterintuitive, but the theory is that highly realistic images can set up very high expectations for perfectly lifelike interaction. And if the AI or the animation doesn't quite meet those expectations, it can fall into the uncanny valley and actually reduce the sense of presence. Sometimes a more stylized or abstract representation allows the learner to project more onto it, manage their expectations, and maybe feel more presence as a result. And finally, the strong correlation between social presence and overall player satisfaction in virtual worlds is also very well documented by researchers like Bulu in 2012, highlighting just how important this feeling is for creating enjoyable and therefore potentially effective learning experiences.
Okay. So again, what's the takeaway for educators here? Where does the research need to go next for social presence in learning games?
Well, this is another incredibly vital area, particularly for elementary education. While there are many studies looking into social presence in games generally, studies specifically examining social presence in educational games and its direct effect on learning outcomes are still relatively scarce. Most of the existing research that investigates presence in learning tends to focus on college-level learners, often in more traditional online learning environments like discussion forums, not necessarily within the unique context of young children playing purpose-built learning games. So we really need to investigate further how different specific game design elements actually impact the levels of presence perceived by younger learners, and crucially, how these varying levels of presence then directly affect their learning performance, their retention of information, and their motivation to continue learning.
More research needed, especially with kids.
Exactly. More diversity in the types of games studied is needed too, as different game genres like puzzle games versus exploration games versus simulation games might induce different types and levels of presence. And of course, as with the other factors, more diversity in the culture, ethnic backgrounds, and age groups of the participants is desperately needed to ensure the findings are broadly applicable beyond just a narrow demographic. Finally, future studies really should consider potential confounding factors, like a learner's prior game-playing experience and their general tech skills. These can significantly influence how they perceive and interact within virtual environments and definitely affect the social dynamics that emerge. But overall, this emerging field holds immense promise for making learning games not just effective instructionally, but truly connective, collaborative, and deeply engaging for elementary-age children. It's about fostering a sense of community and shared experience, even when learning happens in a digital space.
Okay, wow. So we've taken a really deep dive today into 3 emerging but clearly incredibly impactful design factors in game-based learning: incentive systems, identity design, and social presence. We've seen how they're definitely not just theoretical buzzwords, are they? They're powerful, research-backed levers for engagement and learning, especially when they're designed thoughtfully with young minds, elementary students, right at the core.
Absolutely. And if we connect all this back to the bigger picture, especially someone working in or going into elementary education, understanding these factors really means moving beyond just that superficial gamification we talked about at the start, which often just means adding some points or badges to a traditional task without any deeper integration. Instead, it means truly designing, or maybe carefully selecting, games and game-inspired activities that leverage these deep psychological principles that help create effective, joyful, and genuinely meaningful learning experiences. It's about creating environments where learning can happen more naturally, driven by that intrinsic motivation, that sense of purpose that really resonates with a child's inherent desire to play, to explore, and to connect with others.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen how carefully designed rewards, especially those that feel informational and support mastery rather than just compliance, can profoundly motivate kids. We've also explored how creating that deep connection with an avatar through customization and narrative can personalize learning and deepen engagement, allowing children to really step into a learning role and explore aspects of their ideal selves.
Hmm.
And we've uncovered how feeling with others, even if they're virtual others through social presence, can significantly enhance the learning environment, making it feel more collaborative, less isolating, and genuinely engaging on a fundamental social level.
Precisely. So as you, our listener, continue your journey into elementary education and maybe explore the exciting world of game-based learning further, just remember that these factors, incentives, identity, social presence, they aren't just technical features on some checklist for game developers. They are truly powerful levers for creating immersive, motivating, and highly effective learning experiences for young minds. They have the potential to transform abstract concepts into tangible, memorable adventures. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about the current learning activities or perhaps the game-based tools you already use or might use in your classroom. What one small intentional change could you maybe make to a lesson or to a game-based activity, to specifically tap into just one of these factors? Could it be a more personalized avatar choice? Or maybe a mastery-focused badge that really celebrates effort and progress? Or perhaps creating an opportunity for safe, structured, collaborative interaction within a game? Just try one small change and see what new aha moments, what new sparks of joy and understanding you might be able to ignite for your students. The power to transform learning through this kind of thoughtful, human-centered design is truly in your hands.
That's a fantastic challenge to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of game-based learning. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep sparking those incredible moments of discovery for your students.